Our final speaker of this session comes out of a similar background. There's a common thread that I think you'll see in a moment. She actually started her career at Procter & Gamble, which is legendary in business circles as being the company where brand management, the notion of actively creating, measuring and managing and growing a brand, not just a product. That notion got invented at P&G. She quickly went from there, though, to being the Ohio digital director for the 2012 Obama campaign and is now a senior digital strategist here in Chicago with the firm of 270 Strategies. Please join me in welcoming Ashley Bryant. Have at it.
Great. Hey, guys. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the message and what that means for actually starting a movement, getting people to be, really feel like they're included and have a voice to actually impact change. And to me, the message has always been key. Tom said it. I started off in big corporations, went to agencies, and for there was about kind of answering the age-old question of how do you get people to buy a product, right? And then moving over into the president's campaign, it was really interesting because it wasn't just about, getting up and buy, right? It's not just about getting people to vote, but it's about getting people to feel as though they're part of something, a part of something that is bigger than themselves. And actually, being in Ohio, it really was a chance for me to give a voice to people that otherwise didn't have their own voice. It was about us speaking for them. It was about us talking about, the president's accomplishments, but thinking through that in a way that resonates well with them, but makes them feel like that we're there for their communities. And that's what we do at 270. We try and build up our communities, but then help organizations think through how do you make an impactful program, or how do you get people to take a valued action, and how do you get people to move? It's almost like a dance floor. That's how I think of it. A message is, it's like all you need is one person to stand up but make everyone feel like they can do something too. They can dance as well. And that's where the message comes in. So I do have a quick video for you guys to take a look at. To me, this is what puts all the key pieces of how a well-crafted message or well-crafted movement can get people to feel involved, but to make people feel like they can actually do something. And it's not just about themselves, it's about the people that are around them. Let's take a look.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
For all.
The first time I'm going to vote will be in November.
Our generation is the one that's not filled with hate or bigotry. We're the ones moving things forward.
I think we're on our way with Obama.
I pledge an open mind.
I pledge my family.
I pledge
my hard work.
It is your voice that must be heard.
I'm voting for the men and women who serve our country.
I believe our safety lies in thoughtful leadership.
People have to fight to have an equal voice.
It allows the middle class to really prosper.
I believe a vote is how we can all contribute.
People have a choice to make.
This
for marriage
matters.
equality, not just for some of us, for all of us.
My children are counting on all of us.
I think we should all be treated the same.
We have to go to a doctor.
Obama's been pushing for that.
I pledge.
I pledge.
Liberty.
I pledge my participation.
Truth. You get one vote.
Vote.
I want our country to move forward.
So obviously the end of that is vote. It's very simple. It's very clear. But what you hear within that is people talking about what it means for them, what that action really means, who they're voting for, and why, and what are the reasons why they're doing that. But what's also interesting is it's the imagery, it's the music that's playing, it's the imagery where you're seeing all different walks of life and all different people, but you have a common message there and a common goal. But you see all of these folks that you may resonate with, the things that they're saying you're gonna resonate with, and so it makes you feel like, wow, maybe this is bigger than just a presidential election. And so I always think about, what do all the great movements have in common? What are the things that, whether it's the civil rights movement or it's how are we organizing for marriage equality? Like, what are the things that all of these great programs have in common? And so a flag, and not just in the physical sense. It doesn't mean that every time you see a big movement of people, there's a flag in front of you. But it's about that vision. It's about the things that you look at to allow you to see that, oh, I'm a part of this. I understand where I am. I think about On Monday, I went to Grant Park to watch the World Cup, and I got to see the U.S. take on Ghana and win, which was awesome. But what I also saw was a sea of red, white, and blue. And that's the imagery. You're all there for that common goal. You're all there to move together and to share in this celebration together. And that's kind of what you mean by a flag, of really having something visual, but an imagery that you can look at, you take one look at, and you know you're in the right room. A cause, which is simple, whether it's about voting or whether it's about education reform or whatever the action is, you have a cause and you're organizing towards that cause. And it could be many different causes. It could be, you think from being a Democrat or a Republican, or just making sure that you have those common values. And that's generally one of the things that is going to be, the end goal, your call to action, and that end value that you want to see or the change that you want to see. So you have your imagery, you have your calls, you know why you're in the room, you know why you're there and why you're bringing people with you. But where's the voice? And the voice is an ambassador, and not just one person. It doesn't mean, here we're looking at Martin Luther King, who's obviously, one of our greatest leaders and was a strong voice for the civil rights movement. But there were many different voices. The same way in a political campaign, where obviously you have President Barack Obama, who's the candidate, or Mitt Romney, but you have so many voices in states and cities that are really giving a voice to the constituents and giving a voice to people. And so again, it's kind of like that dance floor thing, right? Where it takes one person to get on the floor and everyone starts moving, but then it gives everyone else the reason to move as well. And then they become an ambassador or an advocate for that particular movement. And then you have the message, which is my thing, right? I've like I said, even in the corporate world or being in marketing and then moving to advocacy and cause work, the message is key. It's the most important piece, because the message is what gives everyone a clear understanding of what we're moving to do, but then it also inspires. You're not going to do anything if you're not inspired. You're not going to buy a product if you're not moved to buy it. That's the commercial. So when we're thinking about social movements and getting people to actually do something to make a difference or to actually impact change, there has to be a value message there. And so why is the message so important to the movement? Well, like I said, a good message is like music. It's like the lyrics to your favorite song. When you're sad, you might have a go-to song that's going to allow you to sit and sulk for hours and hours. You're not going to put on something that's so celebratory and try and get yourself out of it. That's not how it works. But when you're happy, you have a go-to song that's going to get you up and moving and getting your friends together. And that's what a message is about, right? A message is about what is going to get people to move. And so your message is the lyrics that's going to resonate with people and make them want to get up and actually do something. And that's what the big piece is about. It brings people together, all voices into one. It expresses the diversity of feelings. It brings, when you think of a party or a wedding and you have, the bride's family and the groom's family, and you might not know all of these people, but as soon as that first song drops, the first beat drops, you're all on the floor dancing together. It might even be people, if you go to a club and you see about 10 people that you've never talked to in your life. But if the right song drops, you're gonna dance with them. You're gonna move with them. And that's the same thing about having a good message, where not every Democrat believes in the same things, right? Not everybody is gonna agree with, some of the policies that the president may have. Same way with Republicans. You're not all gonna speak the same language, but there's a common value there, and that's what a message does. It brings you together in a common value. And then it also inspires and gives force for the cause. That's what a message does. It inspires people to really get up and allow themselves to be a voice. It gives folks that would, generally be on the couch and not really be action takers, not be, we heard earlier from more of the data side, be an influencer. But it gives people that opportunity that can join something that is already laid out in front of them, and all they have to do is disseminate that message, because now they're an advocate. And that's the force, the driving force behind creating an effective movement. And then it tells us how to walk. The same of a song will tell us how to dance. It tells you how to move. It gets your body moving in a way that you may not even realize that you ever could even move that way. And that's the same thing with the message. It gives you an inspiration to actually get up and do the things and join forces with people that you may not have ever joined forces with, but inspires you to actually move in a sense that you never thought is possible. You know, in a cliche sense, you know, it only takes one person, right? It only takes one person, one voice to actually impact change. But isn't it amazing when you can get tens of thousands of people moving in the right direction, all because they're walking and talking the same language? They can feel the inspiration and the value from the things that means, you know, the most to them. So I think of a time where, you know, for me, I was never really one to be inspired to move, right? I was the laziest person. I went to work 9 to 5 every day at Procter & Gamble. I loved my job. I loved it. I learned a lot there. But I never was really active in anything. I think, you know, my middle sister, she's the community person. She's always been in the community ever since we were little. And I was always the one that was just, I never even understood why you would go and volunteer your time. Of course, I don't think that anymore. But I was definitely not that person. And for me, and of course this is my personal story and you don't have to agree, but for me it wasn't until in 2011, and I'll be honest, because even in 2008 I was inspired, but the only thing I did was go vote. That was it, which is huge, right? Like voting is huge, it's impactful, it causes change, but I regretted it so much. I regretted it. I didn't understand why I didn't go make phone calls or knock on doors and do all of these things that would have added so much more value to not even just that particular movement, but to even my life. But in 2011, I remember distinctly watching, it was here in Chicago, and I went and I saw the president speak. And this was before I even was in talks of going on the campaign. And there were, you know, things that were being said, and it wasn't just, you know, your usual, you know, this is who I am, these are my accomplishments, or things like that. But I saw a genuine love and value for his community. And something about the way that the Obama campaign organized, because it wasn't about just re-electing someone. It was about organizing communities so that they could have long-lasting relationships with their neighbors to impact change well beyond the president's tenure. And that's what actually inspired me to get up and be a part of that. Because I didn't want to feel like, oh, it was just about a presidential election and, you know, why is that so important to just get people to vote? It shouldn't be that hard. But for me, it was about understanding the bigger picture. And the bigger picture was the movement, the force within our local communities, the force that when you get people to organize for a common goal and around common values, you can impact many different things beyond a presidential election. And that's what caused me to move. That's what inspired me. So I always think through when we're thinking about how do we craft a message or how do you craft a campaign? What does it look like? What's that imagery? The one thing that rings true is it has to be something that it's not just the big commercial. It's not just spending $1 million or billions of dollars on TV, but it's about saying the things that ring true to people and inspires them, but really tugs on the heartstrings and gets people, it meets them where they are, but it's honest, it's the trust, it's the talking to them and with things that matter most to them and their families. And and that's what's really gonna get folks to get up and take a valued action, because it has to be about them and about people that are important to them, and not just about your particular organization and your goals, which of course are important, but you really have to make sure that your programs are centered around the folks that you want to reach and the people that you want to talk to, because they're not going to get up and do these actions because of you. They don't they don't love your organization so much that they're going to dedicate their time and use their networks to better your organization. They want to better people or work towards that end goal or impact that change. That's where you have to craft that message, is around people. It's people-centered. So that's really the big thing for me. I think, like I said, I think through these things in a very simple and just, you know, very layman's types of way. And music has always been a big part of my life. it's like the soundtrack of your life. And so I think when you think through of how you craft a message and what that communication looks like, the words on the page have to lift from that page and really inspire people to move to impact a change that's gonna last well beyond all of us and all of our organizations. Thank you. Talking? Thank you.
You're welcome. Soundtrack is a message is a soundtrack. I like that, and I'm thinking, frankly, of my PBS colleague Gwen Eiffel, who plays some of the greatest jams before Washington Week on Friday night. It's worth gate crashing the studio just to hear what she's got in her mix. So much of our work in the nonprofit world, we focus internally. You know, my volunteer director is weighing another job offer, and wow, I've got a hole in my organization to fill, and wow, I got to go do some fundraising next week. What I'm hearing from you is focus externally more. Think about the story you're telling.
Absolutely.
So how do you, in your own work, how have you been able to influence some of your colleagues or some of the clients you work with now in your work at 270 to get beyond these internal problems and really start to think about how they're conveying themselves to the outside world, that mix of message and flag and all the symbols that make up that?
Yeah, well, I mean, at 270 it's very easy. I don't really have to inspire my colleagues because we're certainly all cut from the same cloth. So I think for us, we're built around being, having people-centered strategies, right? And it's about getting organizations to really understand that before you have this strategy, before you talk to people, you have to get your goals and objectives first, and understand who your audience is. And that's something that we do very well, because I feel like we spend a lot of time getting organizations to understand the importance of how they have to actually understand the people that they want to speak with or that they want to engage with. And so it's actually, it seems like it should be a no-brainer, but unfortunately it's not. A lot of times you have, big communications teams, or you have, all of these different departments that feel like, well, they just talk to each other, but they're not in tune with the folks that they're trying to reach. And so we really work hard to kind of get them to step back and understand the people that they want to reach, and because that's how you can engage with them effectively.
Where does that process go wrong? And this comes straight off the social Q&A. What do we screw up?
Where does it go wrong? What does that mean?
Well, so I'll just read you the question because it's getting upvoted by the second here. How do nonprofits often get it wrong when crafting messages?
Oh, got it. Okay, that makes sense. A lot of times I think it can be a little, the big thing, and I use this term a lot, right, but call to action. I think the big thing is sometimes you have so many goals that they don't understand how to prioritize the main goal. You can't tell people to do 5 different things in one message. It's not gonna work. You confuse them, and then they don't do anything. So I think a part of it is it's a little scary for some organizations to kind of dial back or actually tier out their goals because they want people to do everything up front. And so I think that's where I see, some of the challenges most often is just get people to do one thing at one time. You can come up with an engagement strategy that after a certain amount of time, you can ask them or pull them in to take higher bar actions. But I think the biggest challenge or ways that I see that they do things incorrectly would be to ask folks to do 5 different things instead of just focusing on a common goal.
So we make an ask for one thing. We get people in. Great, I've done the one thing, now I'm out. How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep the story fresh?
Absolutely. It's consistency. I think, obviously you want to have a completely comprehensive and integrative program. So whether that's offline and online, but your messaging is obviously very important from this presentation, but if it's email, it's how are you telling the story? How are you portraying your organization? Whether it's, the first ask could be donate, the next ask could be join us offline at this event, and you'll be surprised of people, as long as you're being consistent in your message, but then also giving them value as well while you're asking them to bring value into your organization. Folks are really inclined to continue to build a relationship with you as long as it's a valuable relationship and they see that, kind of like that rate of return.
So speaking of rate of return, that's a measurement. how do you measure whether the steps you're taking to build a movement, are they succeeding? You know, what are some of the key numbers or metrics you look at to help assess whether a particular communication plan or a particular outreach effort is actually working?
Oh, well, I mean, in many different ways. I mean, I cracked a joke back in the green room because I said you guys had me come out after like big data. And I don't look like the face of big data, but at 270, we are totally data driven and metrics driven. And the way that we're kind of tracking engagement is, you know, thinking through, you know, how users are interacting with you, whether that's your email program and figuring out the actions that they're taking, when they're taking that action, and understanding the audience. For offline programs, you're obviously going to track how they're, you know, if it's a political campaign or an organization, you're definitely going to be looking at if people are, you know, if they're new entrants and if they are persuadable and whether we can continue to interact with them. So there's, I mean, certainly a lot of ways on the back end that we look at things digitally, obviously, through, you know, social tracking and using some of those tools and just really understanding where they are in like a ladder of engagement and figuring out whether they're influencers or if they're just spectators and things like that. But you can definitely track success in many different ways.
So Derek's going to love this one, and thanks for all the social Q&A. You guys are making this job real easy this afternoon. To get a little meta for a second, what should the message of MCON be? How would you take what's happened here over the last couple days and turn that into a movement?
What's his name? Do you have their name?
No,
okay.
but a lot of people are voting for it, so you're on the hook now.
Well, I'm going to take the easy way out. I think MCON has a great message, right? It's about, you know, how do we inspire folks to do cause work in this generation? And I think that's a great message. And as you can see throughout the diversity of speakers, there's so many different ways that you can be involved and so many different ways that you can push this, you know, the millennial generation into, you know, better cause work, but then also innovating a bit more in the cause space. And I think that we've seen that over the last, you know, 5 to 10 years, the cause space has really kind of blown up. And so I think this actually has been a good message. I think seeing the number of attendees and the people watching online, I would rate them an A+ with the message they already have.
So last thing, to put you on the spot just one more time. It's Monday morning. Somebody's come back from this great conference or from spending the last 2 days watching it online. In terms of thinking about their messaging, you know, whether they're working effectively to build that soundtrack, if you will, what are some of the questions they can ask their bosses to start to get a movement rolling in their organization?
Sure. I think, you know, I think one of the first questions would just, not necessarily a question, but creating an open space for brainstorming and just really kind of looking at your message thus far, looking at how it's been performing, if it's been effective. And I think really just getting, you know, different functions in one room to really understand, like I said before, you know, the objectives of where you want to go. But I think for any brand or any organization, the one thing that I think is a misstep is that when you think of a tagline or you think of their brand persona, sometimes I believe that organizations are more timely than timeless. And so the first thing I would say is, you know, making sure that you have something that is withstanding and something that's going to, a message that's going to touch everyone versus what's new and hot now or what makes sense now. And so again, I think the one thing would be, you know, facilitating that brainstorm and starting that process and figuring out what's working and what's not working is, you know, a very simple first step. But then keeping in mind that the timeless and timely piece is huge.
Outstanding. Ashley, Bryant, thanks very much for your time this afternoon.